Welcome to Ask Sean, where I explore all sorts of questions about being human and invite you, the listener, to become more present to yourself, your relationships, and your life. I'm Sean Slevin, a licensed professional counselor and a licensed marriage and family therapist. And if you have a question for me, you can send that to me anonymously at asksean.org. So in this video, I'm going to be fielding one of those anonymous questions. So I'm going to start by reading the question. It's pretty lengthy, but I'm going to include all of it because it's just this person was very thorough and articulate, and I think, it's a lot of helpful info. Sean, I am wondering if you could unpack what strength looks like when confronted with a person who is treating you in a way that is hurtful. Perhaps a different angle on that, how should anger be handled in the moment? In a prior video, you explained that anger needs to be purified through sorrow. I agree. However, I struggle with handling that anger in the moment, especially when confronted with someone who is pushing my buttons, intentionally or unintentionally. I was once coached to, quote, meet their intensity, end quote, to avoid becoming a doormat. At times, that has been helpful advice in my life and helped me to be more assertive. At other times, it has led me to being too aggressive in response to unintentional hurts. It has even caused me to hurt people in my life I care about, as I tend to come back harder in these situations. I have no doubt this response is related to my own past hurts, especially in dealing with an aggressive, dealing with an aggressive father, older brother growing up, and an emotionally unstable mother. For further clarity, I am thinking about 3 specific scenarios from the perspective of a man and a husband. 1, a critical wife, not all the time, just in certain moments. 2, a workplace bully. And 3, a person who is just a little jerky / inconsiderate. So lots to unpack here. I'm grateful for whoever took the time and the risk of sharing a little bit of their life with me and all of us. There's a lot of good stuff here. For one thing, I really appreciate this person is connected with the sorrow piece. And it's very logical follow-up then to say, okay, but how do I implement this, right? Like, I'm in the moment, our anger has a way of surging. And in some ways, that's kind of part of the role of anger. Anger in a healthy way is meant to bring clarity, and often clarity about matters of right and wrong, justice, injustice. The problem for all of us is that because in most cases, our anger has not been purified through our grieving and our becoming really masters of the grieving process, our anger is often incredibly imprecise and very not calibrated. And so, this individual, this man is kind of illustrating that, right? And with his vulnerability here with us, of how in his attempts to become more assertive, which is something it sounds like he's needed to work on, he can overshoot, and this is super common. I can relate to this. I have my own, I've talked about in some videos, right? My own patterns of wanting to be nice, and that being something, kind of out of my own wounding and out of, not wanting to, perpetrate onto others things that I experienced. And yet, as I've had to work at engaging my own anger and my own struggles asserting myself, it's very imperfect. It's very messy. It's like, when you're learning to ride a bike, you start to fall off one side, and then, the next time you overcalibrate and you fall off the other side. And so there's a lot of kind of swinging back and forth here. Now, the question is, are we reducing those oscillations, right? Like, ideally, like if we're learning to ride a bike, we start to calibrate, and so then, we're kind of wobbling in the middle and we're progressing down the street, right? And so there's always that calibrating back and forth. Like, it's never totally steady. Even the most stable rider, if we could magnify, we would see all these micro movements happening, right? Back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So the question is, are we sort of reducing those oscillations, or are the oscillations getting more extreme, right? And that's something that happens commonly if we are in a pattern of suppressing and then blowing up and suppressing and blowing up, and we're just sort of kind of going further and further out the pendulum of like, okay, well, I'm never ever going to share anything, right? And so we suppress for a long time, and it seems like we think we're doing fine, and then just all this shit erupts, right? Because we haven't been dealing with it, we haven't been actually grieving it or facing it or learning how to express it well. So I think one thing I want to say to the individual who wrote this, and to the many of you watching this that are resonating with some of this, is that take some encouragement in the fact that you're taking the risk, right? I think it's hard that practicing anything new, we're gonna mess it up. We're gonna hurt ourselves. We're gonna hurt other people, right? We're gonna fall off the bike, on both sides, and that can be discouraging, and it can just feel like, well, maybe I shouldn't be doing this at all. Now, I'm not excusing our bad behavior, right? When we fail and we overstep, right, and our assertiveness and trying to have what I would call a healthy aggression, although that sounds really loaded, so maybe we'll unpack that later. But assertiveness is a less charged word. But in that process, we're still responsible for when we fail by overshooting and we hurt anyone, right? And yet, to not try at all would be a more tragic thing, right? We have to get up, pick ourselves up, face our shame, make our apologies, make amends, and try again, right? Otherwise, we will for sure end up in that increasingly wide oscillations of pendulum swing, right? So I guess I would say too that every time we fail is an opportunity, right? And thinking specifically about these kinds of dynamics, it's an opportunity to get curious about, okay, so what was going on inside of me that my anger got so strong, so loud, so big, so fast, that in the moment it felt so right, to blast this person, this loved one even, right? There's an opportunity there. I guess I want to say, don't waste it, It's okay, I just screwed up, but that's not the end of the story. What I do with it afterwards is huge, right? It doesn't make up for the fact that I failed, but it doesn't waste the opportunity. It capitalizes on, okay, well, a bunch of stuff just came to the surface. Let's get digging, let's get investigating, right? Now, that can be hard, this can get into lots of shame stuff. Now, this individual doesn't specifically mention shame being in the mix. I'm sure that shame is in the mix, at least some, maybe a lot. Based on how they're writing, they clearly are reflective and have been doing some work on themselves, and sounds like maybe, have whether worked with counselors or coaches or mentors or they're sharing their life with other people. The fact that people have counseled them, have suggested they should practice this, try this. So all of that, I guess I want to say, if you are the person that wrote this, is you're pushing back against shame by even being able to take the risk to articulate this, to say it, to write out the words, which is a saying it to yourself, to write it knowing that I was going to read it. To write it knowing that I would be reading it on camera, right? That the world would hear a little bit of your story. Granted, anonymous, and good job on, leaving out identifying details and whatnot. But nonetheless, to hear our story, read, even anonymously, that's vulnerable. And our shame can want to jump on that. What if the therapist makes fun of me? What if other people make fun of me? All these kinds of things. And so this is part of how we combat shame, is that we do the thing that shame says, don't you dare do. Now, that's maybe requires wisdom, right? Because sometimes this is tricky, right? Because shame will shame will shame us for anything, including things that we ought not to do, right? It's like, shame will be like, don't you rob that bank. So the answer there isn't to go rob the bank. The answer is to try to get at the underlying thing, right? What's the healthy thing, the healthy version of robbing the bank, like the healthy risk that I should be taking, and let me go and do that, right? So yeah, there is wisdom required there. But the general principle is, if there's a healthy thing of like, I could be vulnerable with this person, right? And shame says, don't you do that, they're going to reject you. Like, again, I'm pausing because I'm recognizing even there is wisdom is required, right? Because some people will reject us. That does happen. But if we never take the risk, we're never going to find the people who won't reject us. Or to put it positively, we'll never find the people who would be like, hey, I get it. I fail too. I fuck up too. Right? The people who can accept us even as they invite us to grow and change, right? Like acceptance and love doesn't mean it turns a blind eye to our failures. It just says, well, I see your failures and I see you and I love you, right? Like that's actually real acceptance. And in a so-called acceptance that's like doesn't care about what we do is like, well, I don't know that that's actually really an acceptance. It's like, well, you only accept me because you pretend my failures don't exist. I want people in my life who accept me in the midst of seeing my failures. Like the friends that I have that are willing to confront me on things, like those are the most precious friends in the world. Like they love me enough to say, hey, this didn't feel good. I need to talk to you about this, right? Like that is a loving friend. That they have seen my failure, they have seen my ugliness, and they're willing to say, hey, I still want relationship. Like we need to talk about this, and like I need an apology, and I need some things to I need you to work on some things, but I care about you, and I want this to work, right? So we're gonna kind of meandering around here in terms of kind of some groundwork pieces, right? Like that to work on the things that this fella is raising, we've got to be able to create some space around us in which we're not just constantly fighting the shame. We got to be able to push back against that shame. So certainly if you're watching this, whether you're the person that wrote in or someone else and you have more follow-up questions and all that, go to asksean.org and send me your question or questions. But let's continue here. So actually I'm doing a new thing. I sort of made, not maybe an outline, but I jotted down a few ideas because I want to try to cover as much as possible of what this individual is raising. So we'll see if this sort of helps me stay a little bit more on point. No promises. So one of the themes that I was thinking about with this individual's story is kind of a theme of safety. Like I'm hearing the possibility, I guess I would say. This is a hypothesis. If I was talking with them in real time, I would put this forth and be like, how much does that, feel on target? So safety in the sense of, when I think about our being quick to anger, it's typically because our system is amped up because of potential threat. And this individual alludes to, they've already made the connection that there's childhood stuff, right? They learned at an early age ways in which life wasn't terribly safe or predictable with both of their caregivers in different ways, with their older sibling. And so there's a lot of practice here, that this individual has at, I've got to be on guard. My system has to be on guard. So safety here isn't about even necessarily I'm going to be physically unsafe. And it doesn't actually necessarily have to be a reflection at all of the people around us. Rather, what I mean by safety here, or not feeling safe, is more about my system is having trouble establishing and maintaining a sense of I'm okay and I'm gonna be okay, right? Like it's moving. It's either staying in a bit of a heightened state, or it's quickly jumping to a heightened state to a degree that is out of sync with what's actually happening, right? So, say say I've got some trauma I'm still working through, and I hear a loud noise, and my system, immediately goes into like, oop, do I need to run from that? Do I need to fight that? Fight, flight, freeze, and so forth, right? Those survival modes. That's problematic because it's like, we do need our survival modes, but we don't want them firing unnecessarily because they're very efficient and very good at what they're doing, but they're costly when they're not actually needed. They're costly because they're high intensity. There's a lot of energy going on typically, at least with some of them. Or there's a loss of energy in the more extreme ones, like collapse, shutting down. But they're costly also in that I'm out of sync relationally, right? Like, if somebody's just asking me about something and that hits a nerve in me that I go into more of a survival mode, that is like that's going to be disorienting to them. It's going to be potentially harmful. It can create a rupture, right? So that's where it's kind of this, things are out of calibration. Things are our system is responding as if there's a degree of threat that there is not actually in the present, but there once was, right? That's the thing. It's it's not, as I say in other videos, it's not that there's not a kind of truth here. It's just that it's not a truth totally related to the present. So kind of circling back to what I was saying a little bit ago, this is part of the opportunity. It's okay, so I need to become an investigator. I need to do a post-mortem after I've blown up. Let me not waste this opportunity. Let me start reflecting as soon as I can, as soon as I start to come back to myself. And if if I'm still interacting with a person, I need to start to acknowledge hey, I realize I just fucked up, and I need to process it a bit before I can give a full apology, because I want to really be able to speak, really to what I just did. So I need to, attend to what's going on here, but I want to acknowledge, I recognize I just hurt you and I am sorry. And, and let's talk more. But we want to, as quickly as possible, we want to, and, maybe it's 20 minutes later, maybe it's 3 days later, maybe it's a month, it doesn't matter how long. When we are able, we want to turn towards that event, and we want to get curious again, without shaming ourselves. We want to start to wonder, what was in my system? What was happening in my system, right? And we're not just, I'm thinking of this individual who, clearly has done some reflection. They're making connections to childhood stuff and unresolved, things that they're still working through. So it's not just about the details of the story, right? It's about, I'm trying to feel into I was really scared, right? I was scared that, I, was not going to be enough and this person was going to reject me. I was scared I was going to be attacked, maybe. I was, maybe I was really sad, and maybe I felt ashamed of my sadness, and so I had to cover it with anger, right? There's all these bazillion different variations. But I want to get to practice, and this is actually one of the things I wanted to talk about, is I wanted to get to practice revisiting this. And there's another way we can practice this as well that I'll talk about. Revisiting the experience and getting to be with whatever was making me so angry, and kind of try to walk with myself through that, right? Because it ultimately isn't about the anger. If the anger is outsized, then that means there's something additional in there. Because anger, when it has been totally purified, it's going to be exactly the right amount that's constructive and ultimately life-giving and life-preserving, right? Anger is a necessary emotion. It's just really fucking hard to be in good relationship with and to do well. So whenever it's it's outsized, right? Whenever it's there's more than, either too much or too little, honestly, when either of those, kind of equations, if you will, indicate that there is something else in there in the mix, that is needing our attention. And so we want to get curious about that. We want to become detectives about that. what are the emotions, the experiences in my body and in my psyche and in my history? What are the parts of me, right? The younger parts of me that are living in a historical place that came up in that moment, took the wheel of the car, and were like, "No, not again!" right? Not realizing, not knowing what the rest of us knows, that like, oh, actually, buddy, like that's not what's happening here. Like, I know it reminds you a little bit of that, but this is different, and this person is different, and this moment is different, and we are different, and we don't need to respond that strongly. Which by the way, doesn't mean that there isn't an appropriate anger for whatever that moment is. There very well may be, right? Because again, anger serves important functions when it's lived healthily, right? So it's not about like any anger means there's something going on in me. It's when it's outsized, right? When it's out of sync with what's actually happening. So yeah, so we practice after the fact by revisiting. We can also practice in advance. This is something that I have done a ton in my life. I have learned sort of the art, I guess you will, of constructively running scenarios, running through an interaction, really on the front or the back end, right? So at the moment I'm thinking about like I'm preparing to have a conversation that I know is charged for me, and so for me I like to pace, partly because if I'm dealing with stuff like this, there's energy, and so like pacing is just it helps my body have something to do while I'm trying to like make sense of the emotions. So like I'll either pace in my home, or if it's nice out, like I'll go out in the field and I'll just walk back and forth. And I love to talk it out loud, because I can hear my own voice, and I can hear where like, there's still an edge there. And I've learned to be I get really nuanced with myself, right? Like I'm not content with just like, oh, I didn't raise my voice. I'm like, yeah, you didn't raise your voice, but there's still a subtle dig. Like there's still unhealthy anger in that, right? Like I haven't totally purified that. So what's that about, right? And so I'll play through a conversation until I get to a point in it where I'm getting really charged, and then I pause there, and I kind of try to really study that of like, okay, what is happening with me? Why is this so intense? What is it that I'm longing for? What is it I'm afraid of? Where are the young parts, right? And so then something will come up, maybe I start to touch some sadness eventually. I work with that a bit, spend however long I need to. And then I run through the scenario again, and I go until it's like, I starts to get, and I'm like, okay, all right, so what's happening here? There's still something there, right? This is part of the gift of our screwing up, is that every screw up is an opportunity for more healing. Every screw up is a way in which our psyche is saying, hey, we're not at peace about something. If you don't fucking do something about it, we're going to wreck your life. So pay attention. Now, I'm not making light of the fact that we fail people and hurt people, right? Like that's a serious thing. But I'm just saying, like, that's not the whole story. Like part of what's embedded in that is I'm being invited to do more healing. I'm getting another chance, right? Like I'm getting another chance with myself and with whatever that history is, right? So this is huge. This practicing on the front end and then practicing on the back end, right? So it doesn't matter whichever. If doing it proactively is helpful, doing it after the fact is helpful. Which actually gives me an idea for a little bit of homework. Not that I'm gonna be able to check up on you, because this is anonymous. But a way that you can do this in a small bite, right, is that you could develop like a daily habit. I tend to think of doing something like this early in the day, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. And it doesn't have to be long. These kinds of habits are more useful in small bites with frequent repetition. So it's better that you do it once a day for like 2 minutes than that, you're doing it once every 2 weeks for 3 hours. It's great when we can spend 3 hours on something, although that takes a lot of emotional stamina, which can take time to build up to. But it's much more useful. You'll get a lot more mileage, especially when you're starting out, in the more frequent repetition of small bites. So what I'm thinking of here is either at the beginning of the day or the end of the day. So actually, end of day can be really good for this too, now that I think about it. So if you do end of the day, because this is actually a common bit of homework I'll give people. So end of day, you'd spend like, I don't know, 5 minutes, whatever you can bear. Don't go. The goal is not to go long. The goal, again, is just to touch it a bit. And you look back over the day for where was there any irritation? Where was there any anger? And then you start to wonder what else was present? What other emotions were present? Now, a tool, two useful tools with this that can aid you in this is a feeling word list and a body sensation list. And I have both of these on my website. I will try to remember to put links to both of those in the video description. And so those can be useful tools. The ones on my website are interactive, but you can also download PDF versions if you want. So if you want, you can jot down the words, right? But really what this is doing is it's building your awareness of the other things that are present in the equation, right? Like it's not just anger, it's not just irritation most of the time. It's like, there's sadness, there's fear, there's confusion, there's shame, there's tiredness, there's all kinds of different things going on. And so I want to be able to notice that and actually be with that, right? Because if I just stay at the level of anger, I'm missing all this experience that's happening inside of me. I'm abandoning it, like I'm leaving it alone, like unsupported, right? So we can reflect back over the day, just a few minutes, right? Don't make it super long. If 5 minutes feels too long, do 2 minutes. If 2 minutes feels too long, do 30 seconds. I really don't fucking care what the length of time is, as long as you're not trying to overdo it, number one. But you do what little bit you can do that you are going to be able to do tomorrow, right? Or at least every other day, right? We want it to be pretty frequent if we can. So, because it doesn't matter how big the bite is, that what matters is that it's a bite I can chew and it's a bite I will chew again, because that repetition will build emotional strength. It'll build emotional capacity, and you're building relationship with parts of yourself that you're not fully connected to. Because if you were fully connected to them and loving them better, they wouldn't be freaking out. They wouldn't need to act out because you'd know them and you'd be helping them, and there'd be no need to have this outsized anger, right? So hopefully that makes sense. So part of how this relates to the safety piece is that when we're not sufficiently connected to whatever the underlying hurt is, whatever, and not just the concept of the hurt, but actually relationally there, right? If a child comes to us and they're like, I skinned my knee, if we're just distant of like, oh, yeah, it is unfortunate to skin one's knee, and sort of this, the concept of it or whatever, right? No, we got in there, oh, buddy, what happened? Oh my goodness, wow, yeah, you got a little bit of it's a little bloody, huh? Yeah, well, let's get that cleaned up and, get a Band-Aid on you. And oh, no, I'm sure, I bet that was scary. My goodness. Right? That's where we want to get in there and be present. Not in a freaking out kind of way of oh my gosh, you're going to die. But in a you had an experience. I want to know your experience, right? So when we're not sufficiently knowing our parts and not sufficiently being with them, that's part of why they feel unsafe, right? This is where, as I've talked about in another video, which maybe I can make that appear up on the screen or something, that no one can make you feel safe, right? No one can actually make us feel safe. We will say things like, oh, you're making me feel unsafe. No one can make us feel safe or unsafe. Now, that doesn't mean we don't affect each other, right? If someone's holding a knife, that is going to increase my likelihood of feeling unsafe, right? There is a kind of an objective decrease in sort of safety, in terms of my, proximity there to that knife. But how I feel in my system is very personal. If I have say I've got a background where I have lots of practice of dealing with knife fights and I'm really skilled and nobody, nobody's been able to successfully knife me in ages, I might be okay, well, this is kind of annoying, but boom, 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 whatever, I'm thinking cool martial arts movies, right? That individual, they don't actually feel unsafe. Yes, there's an unsafety element logistically, but their emotional experience is, I'm going to be okay, most likely. And this is like when I talk about my horseback riding, when I'm doing jumps, right? Like there's a variance in day to day in terms of how safe I feel in my system as I do jumps. And there are some days where I'm just like, I'm in the zone and I'm particularly grounded, and maybe I've been working on jumping recently, and so it's like I'm in the habit of that, and it's just like, yeah, I'm just doing it. And then there's other days where it's like, oh, okay, and there we go, like and which is part of why I do it, because I'm always trying to work on my edges, like these parts of me that if I don't keep sort of pushing out at the edges, the tendency is that the fearful parts of me will contract my life. And so I do this within limits, right? Like I'm not doing anything that's way outside of my capacity, right? But I am taking some risks. I'm going into places where it can be like, woo, oh goodness. So that I can work through that, and I can help my system, my body, and my emotions repeatedly get to acclimate to it's actually okay. And so that's another aspect to practice here. So we first have to get more in sync with, more in tune with, what are the particulars of what my system is upset about that it needs to go to anger in a outsized way, in an excessive way. And then as I start to dial in on those particulars, right? Maybe the fear of loss. What if this person's upset at me, and this part of me is worried, well, maybe this will be the thing where they leave me, where they're a friend or a partner or whatever, or, a boss is going to fire me, like this catastrophic loss. Well, I want to be able to get to know that fear so that I can start to learn how to comfort myself. Like not in a demeaning way, like there, you stupid little thing, right? But in like oh my goodness. Like this fear comes from real places in my life where that felt plausible, right? And this part of me doesn't know that maybe this present circumstance actually is very unlikely, that it's actually not plausible, not likely that whatever the thing this part is afraid of would happen in this present circumstance. And I want to help him know that, right? I want this young part of me to know, like, actually there's things in my life that are better. If nothing else, I am bigger. I have more options. I have more resources. I have adult capacities, right? Which I didn't have as a kid. I have more of myself. I have people in my life who do love me, right? Now, I realize as I say that when we're really triggered, it can feel hard to believe those things. But this is why we have to practice, right? We're trying to build up the capacity to be connected to the full picture. And the full picture does involve that I've suffered hard things. And it does involve that I may suffer hard things even in the present and the future. But the full picture also involves that there's a lot of beauty and a lot of good, and that I have made it through all of these things. I'm still fucking here. I have lived to tell the tale. And this is one of the things that wounded parts are not very connected with. Like they can live in a perpetual state of, I'm not going to survive. I'm not going to survive. Like they don't know, well, actually we did survive. We did it. Not perfectly, of course, but we made it. We're still here, And so this is part of our responsibility in shepherding and parenting, in a sense, these parts of us, is helping them get to know it really is okay. Like, yes, it was really hard. And we have to really be able to enter into that, right? We're not trying to skip over any pain here. We're not trying to skip any steps. And that can be really involved. I mean, I think one of the tricky things here on video is like, I don't know whether this would actually be appropriate, but I almost wish I could like invite you into like little snippets of my life where I was in the throes of really deep pain, and how I would be weeping and also trying to like stay present to the weeping, right? Like so it's like I wasn't being lost in the weeping, like some even a little bit of me is like sort of able to sort of stay present and stay grounded as I'm being with, that really intense pain. And that's not a quick process. It's not a few moments, right? That's a lot of repetition, and some of those, kind of episodes, if you will, were lengthy. I mean, could be hours, right? Like, and that's, I'm somebody that I go all in and I do really fucking intense work with myself because I don't want to leave any parts of me behind. I don't want to leave any corner of my soul, of my psyche, abandoned or unloved. And so I keep going after it, right? And so this is the invitation for you is to persist, and this is our lifetime endeavor, right? Like there's always going to be more work to do. So it's not like we're ever totally done, but it does get easier with practice, and there can be less and less stuff that's like, so intense and so raw. So let me get my bearings here. Check my list. This is where having a few things written down saves me, because this is the kind of moment where I'd be like, I can't remember. I know there's other things and I can't remember what they are. So yeah, and maybe I'll try this list thing more often. Let's see. So yeah, one of the things I wanted to touch on, kind of a related piece. So as we start getting practice with facing the pain, the fear, the shame, the things that are underneath the anger, that are making the anger bigger than it needs to be, I am wondering for this individual, for this fella, I'm wondering if you would benefit from finding some structured, contained activities where you can explore like healthy aggression. Sorry, I'm phlegmy. What I mean by that, and I know aggression is a really charged word, but I don't see aggression as automatically negative. I understand why we tend to think of it only as negative, because most of the time it is. It's like in terms of what we've experienced, what we see. But I think of a healthy aggression, or if it's less difficult language, kind of healthy assertiveness, as a capacity for powerful, decisive action that is coming from a very grounded place, that is coming from clarity and is bringing clarity to a moment. One of the things that can happen for us as men and women, I think there's particular facets of this or flavors of this for us as men, when we have, especially if we've kind of have a bit of a tender heart, which I suspect that this individual does, just kind of given how thoughtful they are and reflective they are. When we've suffered abuses, when we've suffered other people's mishandling of their anger, right? And kind of misuse of their power and whatnot, there can be a real fear of our own intensity. There can be, sort of this, for me, I kind of describe this as the fear of becoming the monster. And so part of what this means then is that we don't get to practice and get good at like not becoming a monster, but becoming like really healthy angry, healthy assertive, right? Because we're so afraid of going towards it, right? That we only get to work with it when it explodes, which is kind of like only riding a bike when like somebody pushes you down a really steep hill on a bike. And it's like, that is not the time to be doing your initial practicing. You should be practicing other times and working your way up to something like that, like ideally. So, working with a therapist, a skilled therapist could be really good here. By skilled, I mean, I don't mean technically skilled. I mean emotionally skilled. Like they have to be unafraid of anger, and not seduced by anger. I mean, that's one of the, it's like we can err on both sides. So, if they're just like, yeah, da, 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 and they did this to you, and so you should be fucking angry. It's like, well, yes, we want to have anger. But like, just you want more nuance than that, I guess is what I'm getting at, right? But you also don't want a therapist or a helper who is just like, always like, well, let's da 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 da, let's tone it down, right? You want someone who can be like, right, I get it. You're fucking furious. And then from there can help you start to dip into what's underneath, right? Like that they can meet that intensity. They're unafraid of it. They're like, bring it, and like they can help you sort of get, again, under the underlayers. One of the models that I'm trained in, I'm certified in actually, is sensory motor psychotherapy. this is a somatic approach. It can be great for working with anger. There's just a number of things because anger is very embodied, very energetic. It lends itself well to somatic approaches. So that would be one suggestion. Try to find somebody trained in sensory motor psychotherapy. But I'm also thinking about like things outside of the therapeutic context. I'll just give two examples from myself, because I've made intentional effort to move towards sort of my anger energy, my aggressive energies, my assertiveness energies, because I don't want to be afraid of them. Because if I'm afraid of them, that means I'm not actually in control of them, which actually means I'm more dangerous. That's the irony, right? Like the people who are more likely to be, well, actually, I'm thinking, I guess, some caveats. So I think that maybe two categories of people that can be dangerous around like aggression energies, assertiveness energies, anger energies. One is when we're so afraid of our energies, we can't engage them, intentionally, right? Because then it's like, well, how am I going to be skillful? Because at some point, something's going to come up and I'm going to be flying down that fucking hill and I haven't been practicing riding my bike. That's not great, So no wonder I'm going to wreck and run into somebody, right? Like, that's just what's going to happen. So I need to own that. I need to own that I haven't been preparing myself well. The other category would be if we're unafraid and uncaring. Maybe that would be the example, right? Because we want to get to a place where I'm not afraid of my anger. But yes, I'm gonna care. Like I always want to be really thoughtful about. I'm not trying to hurt people. I'm trying to bring the right amount of energy that I think this moment needs for whatever the good is that I'm seeking, right? And I want that to come from a really pure, grounded place. If I think there can be certain severe types of wounding where maybe they're not afraid of their anger, and they actually should be, right? They actually need to learn how to care about, kind of their anger and what's going on there. So anyways, we don't need to go down that rabbit trail, but yeah, so two examples from my own life. One has been horseback riding. Horses are fucking big and scary, man. Like they have big energy and they get spooked and they're like, woo, they can jump to the side, like, they move in all sorts of unexpected, interesting ways, which is, that's something. But just even being on the ground. So I reapproached, I've talked about this in other videos, but like I had a lifelong fear of horses and I reapproached horses, several years ago now. I don't know how many years it's been, because I was afraid of them. And I was like, you know what? I need to work on my fear. I need to work on my fear of big energy, and sort of assertiveness energy, healthy aggression, if you will. And like horses are like these big primal beings, right? That are super embodied. They take up a lot of space, like physically and like sort of psychically, if you will. Like their whole language is embodied, and sort of how they are in their bodies is how they kind of communicate. So I was like, this would be really good for me, and it has been so powerful. Both the horseback riding and I do something called groundwork, which is where I'm on the ground doing stuff with the horses. And they basically are a mirror. They show me what's going on with me. Now, also they're showing me things going on with them. So it's both, right? And I have to learn how to interpret it. But it's never just like, oh, why is this horse being a butt? It's like, no, like they keep doing that in part because there's something going on with me. I'm inviting that, I'm allowing that, like thinking like boundary issues, for example, right? And so that it's this little microcosm where I've had to practice getting more comfortable, getting more clear and more firm, and like that can be okay, and that actually the horse needs that from me. Like they just want to know, what the hell are we doing? And when I'm like, oh, I don't know, what do you want to do? Like they're like, are you lead horse or am I lead horse? Because like I'm a herd animal and I need to know who's in charge, because I'm concerned about like not being eaten by wolves. So like, what are we doing? And so the horse actually, their nervous system relaxes, and you can learn how to recognize what that looks like. What are the signs of that? Their nervous system relaxes when I get clear of like, hey, no, don't do that. We're doing this, right? And for me, I've had to work through like, oh, am I being a tyrant? Is it okay? Like I've had to get comfortable with like, no, I can ask for what I want and need. And like, yes, there's collaboration at times, but there's also times where it's like, no, buddy, we're going to work, we're here to do some stuff and, we're going to do this thing. Right. And I can assert that, and that's okay. And that's actually good. And it's actually what horses do in the herd, right? Like they will, honestly, I am way kinder than they are to each other. Like, they fucking bite and kick each other and all these things. And that's just what they do. That's how they like say, hey, no, I don't like that. And then the others, oh, okay. And then like, they settle down and like they got clarity. Right. And so I don't, I'm way kinder, but I've gotten comfortable with being clear, right? This clarity element of anger. And so it's not, in this case, it's like anger can feel almost not the right word, because it's not that I'm mad at them, but it's anger in its most pure distilled form. And then I'm like, hey, no, this is what we're doing, right? And so it's not a triggered anger. I'm not losing my shit or anything like that. It's just this like, I'm getting unambiguous, right? About, what I'm asking for and what I'm expecting in the moment. So I'm not saying you have to do horse stuff. I'm just saying that's an example, right? So ponder that. That would be an invitation. Is like what's something you're drawn to that would challenge you, that maybe has this a little scary in terms of like it's going to require you to step up and to be more clear, right? And to take some risks, and then find a setting where you can do that at the pace that you need, right? Like I'm very particular about like, I'm not going to work with a trainer who like treats me like shit or treats the horses like shit, like I've been real fortunate to find trainers who are, they're good people, that we're able to laugh about things, right? I can laugh at myself. We can laugh about, at each other and whatnot. And yet they also can challenge me. And so it's like, and if I'm like, hey, no, I need to move slower, they don't give me shit about that. Right. Because they know it's coming not from a laziness or an avoidance, but like, I need to work through this, and I got to move at the pace that I can own it. Right. So that would be an invitation, practical invitation. Find something where you can be working at this stuff sort of where you're not intensely dealing with childhood things or things like that, but it's like you're dealing with sort of the outworkings of all of this. It's a different angle, I guess I would say, of sort of building these muscles. So let's see here. So thinking about these three kind of situations that you mentioned. So critical wife, experiencing your wife sometimes is critical, workplace bully, or just, like somebody being inconsiderate. So thinking about the things I've talked about and applying these principles, I am wondering about, and what I want to invite you to wonder about, is what's getting touched in each of those contexts. So in these times where you experience your wife as critical, and notice my language there, right? I want to be clear, I'm not letting your wife off the hook if she's being jerky at times, because I'm sure she is, like, because she's human. I don't have to know anything about her to be like, yeah, we're all jerky at times. So, I'm not letting her off the hook in terms of she has her own responsibility to deal with her own stuff, right? But as I've said in other videos, when I experience someone as critical, or is bullying me or whatever, or being inconsiderate, I don't necessarily immediately know what's happening with them. I don't even necessarily know for certain if they're being critical. Here's the interesting thing. I want to keep open the possibility that there could be more going on, or that I am missing something going on with me. At the same time, I want to take seriously that this didn't feel good. Like, there may have been a breach here in terms of like, there may be a thing I need to address with them, but I want to start from this place of wondering, what do I need to address with me? Like, What is this inviting me to know and be with that this hurt, right? Again, that doesn't preclude that there's a relational conversation that needs to happen as well. But I want to start with the relationship with myself first, as much as possible. Now, we get more practiced at this, we can have more confidence in being like, hey, that really didn't feel good. And we can go more straight to, to that conversation. And that actually illustrates a principle here, right? That's worth saying is, end goal really for any of these is I want to be able to lead with vulnerability. To be able to do that, I have to be getting to know my pain, because that's what's going to help me to feel safer inside, to be able to bear the risk of trying something that may totally blow up, right? I might be vulnerable with someone and they might be like, yeah, well, fuck you, you loser. And it's like, if I don't have sufficient grounding in me, that wounded part of me is going to be like, that's it, right? So I've got to have the ability to bear the possibility that it could go awful, right? Or at least that it could go poorly. I mean, we don't need to be prepared for like the worst case scenario, but I want to be prepared for like the average scenario, right? That I could like say, hey, hon, when you said that really hurt. And I need to be able to I need to have worked with this enough that, say if they have a tendency to roll their eyes, which is actually is a really not good indicator. So let's pick a different one, something a little less dismissive. Maybe they have a tendency to kind of, find things funny, right? They don't mean it in a derogatory way, but they just, like if they don't understand something, maybe they nervously laugh or whatever. We need to be able, if we know that's a pattern, right? It's like, well, I want to know that I can weather that and like not be like, what the fuck, right? I want to know that my insides are going to be able to be like, okay, we don't need to take that on. Like, I don't actually know what that snicker was about. Or maybe I know from other conversations that might actually more so be their own insecurity. And so I don't need to make that about me. It still doesn't feel good. It's not the response I want ultimately, but yeah, so hopefully that's helping you understand a little bit of what I'm meaning there. Let's see. But yeah, I'm wondering about like with the, the critical piece, right? Are there questions of like, am I not enough inside of myself, right? Are there questions of feeling not loved? Like, maybe I'm not lovable. Maybe I'm, maybe they think I'm stupid, or, like what's the wounded story that is playing out inside of me that makes that critical comment hurt so much, right? Because here's the thing. If there's no wounded story and somebody says something critical, a couple different things could happen, like depending on what it is, I might be like, yeah, you're right. Like, I'm not very good at that, and it's just like, it's just a thing that is. And because if I don't have any shame about it, if there's no charge, then it's like, yeah, I mean, is there something you want to talk about that? Like, what's the deal there? So that's one possibility. Like that's, another possibility is like, that stings a little bit, that's kind of annoying. I don't like that you said that. But it's like, but I'm not like, like it, like there's, again, cause it's like, if I am sort of, it's like sucking the poison out of a wound, right? It's like, if I've been working at healing there, then it's like, it just stings a little bit for the moment. And it's like, hey, hon, what's the deal with that? Like, you keep saying that, like, is there something we need to talk about? Cause it doesn't feel good. And I don't really know what's happening here. Like, what's the deal? Like, are you mad at me, or like, or am I help me understand, right? But I can't do that if there's a lot of charge there, right? So, so we want to get really curious of like, okay, what's going on in me that makes that as painful as it is, right? Like, why is this thing painful and not something else, right? Because look, there's a lot of different things that could feel hurtful, to each of us. Like, why do I feel hurt about that and not something else? Why does that comment feel critical and not a different one, right? That's the thing to be curious about. Again, doesn't mean there isn't a conversation to have with our partner, but we want to have that second. We want to get some, start to make some progress with this first if we can. Okay, workplace bully. So, and I love actually this order of things, because we're moving from proximate to more distant, right? So workplace bully, okay, this is not somebody I live with, not somebody I sleep in the same bed with. lower importance, lower intimacy. I'm not going to risk as much vulnerability with them because it's not appropriate to that, right? So I also here, I want to wonder about, like, what does this bring up for me, right? Like, why does it get under my skin? What's the thing that it touches, right? Which is also part of how we get hooked into dynamics with bullies. Like, that's part of the dance. Like, how am I continuing in the dance? Like, what needs healing in me such that if I could help that heal, like, this would just be like, oh goodness, like, what's going on with them that they're like that they're feeling the need to pick on me in that way. I remember I've worked in a lot of different contexts, and one of them is I've worked in a lot of manufacturing contexts, like manual labor, and numerous past lives, if you will. And, there's all kinds of ritual hazing kinds of things, hazing in a light way. There's certain kind of jokes that, and so I just, I'm good with patterns. And so after a number of these jobs, like, I would know when I would come into the new job, like, oh yeah, they are going to send me after this invisible, like, non-existent piece of equipment that's probably going to be called something like blah, blah, blah. And so I learned to kind of roll with that and not take offense at it. Cause typically it wasn't, nobody was mean about it. So, which is, granted, this isn't like full on bullying. But there's like, a little bit of like, again, it can be a little hazing, it's like, having a laugh at my expense and whatnot. But I just learned, I basically learned to like, I learned to not take it personally, I guess is what I'm getting at. Like, this is about them. It's not about me. And in fact, I could give it back and be like, yeah, well, do you want me to get blah, blah, blah? Cause, the model XYZ of the such and such, imaginary thing is like even more, but like, and just like give the shit back to them. And they're like, oh, blah, blah, I didn't know what to do with that. Like, they weren't expecting, this, very scrawny, not looking, like not somebody who looks like they've worked in factories, fella to be like, I actually know, I know kind of what's going on here. Like, you're not going to get one over on me. But it could come from a place of like, I didn't come back with meanness. I just was like, yeah, you're going to give me a little shit. I'm going to give you a little shit back. Right. So when we're not able to do that with a bully, we want to be curious about why, right? Like and so here I would be wondering, like, what young parts of me are, given what, what you've shared, the individual who wrote this, what parts of me are feeling kind of powerless, right? Are feeling small, in the face of somebody who is acting big, which bullies do, right? Like, how is this part of me kind of taking over in those moments because it evokes and replays some young stuff, some childhood stuff. So we want to be really careful here. This is delicate stuff inside of us. We want to be patient. We want to be sensitive. We may very well need some help, some assistance in caring for and loving these places. Like, be gentle. But yeah, the answer isn't to go and slug the bully. The answer is to kind of, okay, I want each of these moments to, again, like I've been saying, to be an invitation for me to know my pain better, and to actually be able to be with it and feel what once was really, really, really difficult. And that the echoes of that make this present moment difficult for me to be able to show up. The inconsiderate category. I kind of think about this as like, this is sort of like the learning to deal with and make peace with that life is messy and it's imperfect and shit happens and people, all of us can be annoying and inconsiderate and not even inconsiderate. We're just in our own world, we're living our own life and we don't realize, oh, I just cut this person off, right? Like, I've had that happen, where I'm not trying to be inconsiderate. I just didn't see, which is always particularly troubling for me when I drive because, like, I'm a really careful driver. I love driving, but I'm one of those, like, I'm looking over both shoulders. I'm looking at my mirrors. Like, I want to, I'm really trying to be aware of everybody around me. And so if I, stuff happens, or maybe somebody, it's a color I don't see well, or whatever. I don't know, but somehow they sneak up on me and I'm just like, oh, I did not realize you were there. Like, which is why I check, right? Because it catch that last minute catching things. But, it's like, yeah, so it's like the stuff happens, right? And it's not personal. So I guess that's a thing. Or we don't know if it's personal or not a lot of the time. And we shouldn't assume that it's personal. We should not take that on. But we want to get curious about why we are wanting to, Why does a part of me want to make that about me? Like, oh, stupid son of a bitch. Da, 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 da. It's like, I don't know if that had anything to do with me. Most likely it did not. Like, I'm not that important that this stranger is like, whatever, trying to cut me off. Like, they probably didn't see me or whatever. Or if they were trying to cut me off, why do I want to get caught up in that story? Like, is that what I need my day to be about? Like, so again, wounded parts, though, they're like, yeah, let's get on board with that. Let's recreate something that we're unfinished about, because that's their way of trying to get our attention. That's the only thing they know how to do, right? Just like how a child, will act out because they don't yet know how to be with their emotions more constructively. It's the same thing with our wounded parts, So they latch on to a moment, of like seeming or actual inconsiderateness, right? And they want to then play out a story. And so what is that story? And why is it so compelling? Why do I want to stay entrenched in that story? Like for me, I kind of call it my well of misery. I just dig the hole deeper and deeper. And it's like, and I just love to hang out there. But that doesn't help me heal. It doesn't help those parts of me heal. It just leaves them stuck. It's like, yeah, actually, let's just make it even worse, So get curious about, each of these layers, right? Each of these levels, like what's the story going on? What's happening inside of you? And so I think about kind of one of your original questions was, what is strength? What does strength look like? When confronted with a person who's treating you a way that is hurtful. And so in a lot of ways, that's what I've been describing, kind of this whole video. I'm describing all these different facets of how we become truly strong. So strength isn't what like we see in a bully, for example, right? Like that's actually an absence of strength, right? Strength is I can turn towards the scary places in myself and I can actually be with them. I've had some experiences recently where, I had an experience where a friend confronted me on something that didn't feel good, that I was missing. I was not catching in terms of our dynamic. And one of the things that felt really good to me was being at a place in my journey where I could look them in the eye, and after talking with them and getting an understanding of things, could say, I can see how I failed you here and I hurt you. And I am so sorry. Like, I really wish I had done that differently in this way and in this way. And there was no shame. I don't need to defend. I could just freaking own it. And man, that feels powerful. It's like, if I can own my failures without shame, like, well, shit. I mean, then I don't have to be afraid of like making mistakes. I don't have to be afraid of even like of criticisms, right? Because it's like, well, I don't know, you might be right. It's like somebody was like, oh, your videos are, meander and da 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 da. I'd be like, well, I mean, you're not wrong. Like, I like to think that I have some useful things to say. That's why I keep doing this. And, people, some people tell me that. But, that's just like, that's where I'm at. Maybe some of that I become more skillful with. Maybe I don't. I don't know. Like, I'm going to be me as best I can. And yeah, I take in feedback and I want to get more skillful and more helpful in whatever ways I can. But I'm at where I'm at, like this is me today and this is what I can do today. And so I'm going to do the imperfect good I can do today, even though I'm going to fail at some aspects of it, right? Like, even though there'll be things in the future that I'll hopefully be able to do better, right? Or maybe not, I don't know. Some things progress really slowly. Some things it's like, I may never be able to make that better, right? Like, I'm never going to have more hair on the top of my head. That ship has sailed. It's sailed and it has sunk and there's no recovering. And so, it's like that's just like, let me be at peace with what is, right? So So this is all just facets of how do we become strong? Well, we do the hard thing, right? And we seek out people who can help us do that, whether that's counselors, friends, loved ones, whatever, right? But people who can sit with us in this, who aren't afraid of the places that we're afraid of emotionally, right? And who can guide us, who can help us learn how to be brave, right? Oh my. Well, what a lovely, rich question, or kind of series of questions. I mean, part of me is tempted to read it one more time, but I think in some ways I've covered enough ground, and it's probably time to wrap this up. So, you, the person who wrote this, I hope this is helpful. I hope it's given you a lot to work with. And to all of you who have resonated with bits and pieces, or maybe lots of it, right? I hope it's giving you a lot to work with. I hope it is stirring things up in a constructive way. And yeah, certainly if you have questions, if this brings up things where you're like, ooh, I want to hear more about that piece, right? Then, doggone it, keep hitting my keyboard. Then go to asksean.org. And I would love to hear your questions and get a chance to field them here on the channel. So, well, until next time, peace be with you.